Good afternoon and welcome back. You're watching Business Arena here on TVP World. I'm Aleksandra Marchewicz and these are the latest business headlines. Now, Polish energy giant Orlen has filed a lawsuit against two former executives, accusing them of actions detrimental to the company. This is part of a broader effort undertaken by the company to seek damages from former executives for mismanagement at the highest levels. The lawsuit targets former chairman Daniel Obajtek and his deputy Michał Róg. Obajtek is accused of spending nearly 40,000 euros on hotels, cosmetic procedures and luxury goods. Orlen is also seeking nearly 150,000 euros from Róg for personal expenses he incurred with his business card, including restaurant bills and cigar purchases. This legal action follows a shareholder vote in nearly December, which approved seeking damages from executives who led the company under the former Law and Justice government. It has been almost 2 decades in the making, but the expressway link between Warsaw and Poland's medieval capital, Krakow, is finally complete. The road is one of the most important pieces of Poland's high-speed road network.
Just 13.3 kilometers. That was the length of the missing section of the S7 expressway, which was to link Warsaw with Poland's second-largest city and tourist hub, Krakow. On Monday, December 23rd, this section was finally completed, and the first drivers were able to cruise unhindered from Krakow all the way to Warsaw. Deputy Prime Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, who hails from the region, was at the opening ceremony Monday morning.
This is a major investment, with not only an expressway but also 2 tunnels that needed to be built. A grand piece of specialist infrastructure that we brought to the public.
This final section was the most technically demanding of the 270-kilometer stretch, which now links Warsaw to Krakow. It also joins the S52 northern bypass of Krakow, 12 kilometers of which has also just been released for use. So the total length of the expressways made available on Monday is 25 kilometers.
It's a very important road link not only for the average driver, but first and foremost for the Polish economy, for road transport and for travel and tourism.
According to estimates, a trip down the S7 between the southern ring road of Warsaw and Krakow's northern beltway will now take about 2.5 hours, almost half the time it had taken just a few years ago. Ultimately, the S7 expressway will span 732 kilometers from the Baltic port city of Gdynia through Warsaw, Krakow, and down through the mountains, linking to the Zakopane expressway and Route 59 in Slovakia. Once complete, it will be the longest expressway in Poland. Next year, the country plans to commission some 400 kilometers of new roads.
Next year will be even more positive. There will be more investments and even more deliveries.
This will include more than 67 kilometers of the A2 highway between Siedlce and Biała Podlaska, almost completing the west to east traverse. Road authorities are also planning tenders for 300 kilometers of new roads, expected to be worth between 2.8 and 3 billion euro.
The controversial trade agreement between the European Union and Mercosur, the South American trade bloc, continues to stir heated debates. While touted as a deal that would be beneficial for the EU economy, critics warn that it may prompt adverse consequences.
Here's one group of people not happy with the EU-Mercosur trade deal: farmers. They argue that the agreement with the South American bloc, which includes Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay and Uruguay, will create unfair competition for EU farmers and food producers. They contend that it will invite a flood of produce not bound by the same strict regulations as European food. For Poland, where agriculture is very important, this could spell trouble for smaller farmers who already face challenges competing with larger industrial-scale producers.
The concerns are understandable, but it's important to keep things in perspective. Poland exports significantly more than it imports. Moreover, the vast majority of Poland's imports, such as beef, come from other EU countries like Hungary and Slovakia. Imports from Brazil account for just 0.02%. So we should bear in mind the scale of the issue.
But even after years of negotiations, experts are still debating the real impact of the deal on European agriculture. For example, it sets a low tariff quota for beef at 99,000 tonnes, but this translates to a meagre 1.2% of the overall EU beef consumption. Even without the deal, the EU already imports 200,000 tonnes of beef per year from South America. The agreement, if ratified, will create a free trade zone covering almost 800 million customers. However, no ratification scenario has been chosen by the European Commission to date.
So as you can see, Europe's trade chessboard is being reshuffled, and the new deal with Mercosur could change the game for many of our farmers. But could cheaper imports flood our markets, or might we see brand new opportunities? Stay with us on The Bottom Line, where we'll unpack the pros and cons of this controversial agreement. European tariffs on Chinese EVs may have already had a visible effect on sales. According to market research company Dataforce, electric vehicles from BYD and SAIC Motors, two companies punished with extra duties, accounted for 7.4% of new EV registration in November, down almost 1 percentage point from October. The tariffs are a part of a wider struggle between Europe wanting to prop up its EV offerings and China subsidizing e-vehicles as one of 3 pillars of its new economy. The extra duties, up to 35%, were imposed by the European Commission at the end of October. Dataforce's report is the first indicator that the tariffs are having an impact on sales of Chinese EVs. China already indicated that it will take some measures against countries that weigh in favor of the tariffs. In effect, a deal to assemble Chinese EVs in a Polish factory fell apart. Qatar could halt its exports of liquefied natural gas to the European Union if it is required to pay a fine under a new directive, the country's energy minister has warned. This would put at risk the energy security of the 27-member bloc, including Poland, because of their reliance on Qatar as a key supplier.
Seaborne deliveries of liquefied natural gas from Qatar have been crucial to the EU's efforts to reduce its dependence on Russian energy imports. However, this supply may now be at risk. On Sunday, Qatar's energy minister Saad Sherida Al-Kabi told the Financial Times that the Gulf nation could consider cutting LNG exports to Europe if the EU enforces its new directive.
If the case is that I lose 5% of my generated revenue by going to Europe, I will not go to Europe. I'm not bluffing.
Called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, it requires companies which deal with the EU to address their environmental or human rights impact. Failure to do so will result in a fine of up to 5% of total revenue. Al-Kabi said, however, that he would consider other options, such as paying a 5% fine, but from revenue from exports to the EU. Over the past 8 years, approximately half of all LNG shipments arriving at the Świnoujście terminal have come from Qatar. In addition, Poland has long-term contracts in place for the supply of 2.9 billion cubic meters of LNG annually. The news comes in the face of another supply constraint, as Western European countries scramble to replace Russian gas deliveries ahead of the expire of the pipeline transit agreement.
Our assessment revealed that there is enough non-Russian available capacity to replace all Russian gas supply in the region. It would create shocks, it would probably increase prices, but physically it is possible.
By 2027, the EU aims to wean off Russian gas deliveries altogether. And Qatar, which by 2027 plans to double LNG production, would be an important partner in the efforts to plug this gap. Ironically, that's the same year when the problematic directive goes into force.
And that is all of our business news updates today. But for more business stories, check out tvpworld.com.